Evidence of alien life may exist in the fractures of icy moons around Jupiter and Saturn. On this left of the picture right here, if you're watching this, that is Titan. Very, very cool. And then on the right is a moon that's in the orbit around Jupiter. Jovian moon of Jupiter. All right, let's get into the article. I didn't realize that I could do this. This this reader review. It makes it so much easier to read these articles. Because I don't know if you've been paying attention, but there are some very interesting and very weird advertisements on some of these articles. Anywho, scientists are investigating specific geological features on the largest moons of both Jupiter and Saturn that could be ideal spots for the emergence of life elsewhere in the solar system. So obviously we know about Saturn, and they've sent a mission to Titan. This was a few years back, where they were able to actually film the surface of Titan, because in the atmosphere there is a bunch of clouds, so it's very hard from a satellite's view to see the surface and see what exactly is on the ground. But we have sent missions there in the past, and this article is going to continue to talk about it, but we are going to send some there in the future. So hopefully we get some good stuff. And speaking of good stuff, excuse the camera change. But such seismic features are generated on these icy moons. Scientists believe that when these bodies orbit their parent gas giant planets, the planet's immense gravitational force influence generate tidal forces that squash and squeeze the moons, inevitably flexing these what they would call satellite surfaces. Plus, these tidal forces aren't very consistent with the orbits of both, because the orbits of both moons are elliptical, meaning they are sometimes closer to Jupiter or Saturn. Other times they're much further away. That in turn leads to even stronger tidal forces. We are interested in studying shear deformation on icy moons because that type of faulting can facilitate the exchange of surface and subsurface materials through shear heating processes, potentially creating environments conducive for the emergence of life. Lillian Burkhardt, lead author of the research and a scientist at the Hawaii Institute of Geophysics and Planetology, said in a statement. Then it continues to go on and kind of talk about the specific of Titan, because a lot of people believe that, especially after visiting, that Titan seems to be the more likely source of where we would potentially find life on these outer planets. I mean, once you get out to the orbit of Jupiter or Saturn, it's starting to get really cold out there because you're so far away from the sun. And that's the main concern there, although there are some places out there that we believe to have liquid water. Um, it still is very hard for life to survive out there, especially life as we know it. Life as we know it cannot survive out there. So, I mean, this is pie in the sky type thinking, but that does not necessarily mean that future missions won't be able to prove whether or not that, or at least give strong indications whether or not there is life. Moving on. Saturn's moon Titan has surface temperatures around minus 290 degrees Fahrenheit or minus 179 degrees Celsius. So very cold. During its flybys of Titan, NASA's Cassini spacecraft, a mission that actually ended when I was in college, and I remember watching that mission and it was very emotional. If you'll let me pause this for a second and kind of try and set the scene a little bit here, because when I was in college is my let me stop the share because I think this is important. Kind of what got me into I guess science, particularly space and astronomy, was all throughout high school. I took science courses and I took science classes, but if you ask anybody who really knew me back then, I didn't care at all really about space or about any of this stuff really until I got to college and I had to take an elective course. And one of the courses was astronomy. And I thought, huh, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I see some things online that say it's literally a class that's very easy to get an A in. It's a somebody who I knew who was I think like a semester or a grade above me had taken the course, and they said when they took it, it was just a video game that you would play, and that's how you get credit. So you just basically play a video game and it teaches you a lesson, and then you kind of do your modules or your assignments that way. So I signed up. I said, I'll try it out. I am going to be doing journalism. This is my very first semester, by the way. Let's see what kind of happens, and we'll figure it out. So get into class, and it might have been the first, if not the first day, within the first week. One of our first assignments is to go view the solar eclipse. It would be passing right over us in Pennsylvania. So we would get a pretty good look at it, not directly overhead, but to a point where we could very, very clearly see a solar eclipse, which I'd never seen previously. And so our assignment in class was to go to a place where it's kind of open and view the solar eclipse. So, me excited, I said to my friends at the time, hey, do you guys want to go look at this? And some said yes. And so I wouldn't even say friends. I mean, people that I knew on my floor. We go, we're sitting out in the Penn State Arboretum outside, and we're looking up, and we got in class these things to guard our eyes from the sun. Because you're basically staring directly at the sun. It's just that the moon is just covering most of it up, but you're still getting sun rays that are peeking out behind it. Time going by, and more people are gathering, and you can tell that a lot of people know that this is going to happen, that there is going to be a solar eclipse. And you got people there timing it, people with telescopes that have these huge contraptions on it to block most of the light, but they're getting really good looks, and it's this huge spectacle. And everybody's counting down 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. And as we get down to it, I'm getting more and more excited. I mean, I've seen the stars and stuff, and at that point I had never seen the Milky Way. I still don't think I've ever really seen the Milky Way. Been at a place where it's dark enough to view that, but this was the first time in my life where it was this, whoa, something's going on out in space. There's this event that's happening, and got more and more excited as the count got closer and closer to zero. And they said zero, and I saw as on one side, I believe on my right side, to the right of myself. I don't know where I was facing, north, west, south, or east, but I remember on my right side starts to get a little darker. And then it kind of goes over my head. And as I'm looking through these specific glasses to help shield my eyes, and I'm looking at the sun, I see it get dim, and it stays there for about a minute and a half. But you can very, very clearly see that the moon is moving side to side. Seeing that, especially at that point when I'm new to Penn State, I'm not exactly uh, having a huge friend group. I mean, I kind of just knew the people who I lived with on my floor. I didn't know anybody going to Penn State from my high school or any of my friends growing up. However, I got to see that, and that was one of the coolest things that I'd seen at that point in my life, and it really inspired me to go out and get more involved in the class. Because right after that, we had class, I believe, either the next day, because I don't think it was a Friday class. Um, we go back and we write a report on it. We talk about it in class, and I'm talking to the people next to me, and I'm like, dude, that was like so cool. Were you there yesterday? Everybody's like, yeah, I saw it. I saw it. I saw it. And then the teacher goes in to describe exactly what is happening. She's saying, well, the orbit of the moon is coming around the earth, and you can mathematically time it so that you know exactly when it's going to be. That's why we knew in advance, because we can track the orbit of the moon. We know its path, we know where it's going to be at what times. And then same thing with the sun. And you can line it up and you could say, hey, at this particular location on earth at this time, you'll be able to see the solar eclipse. And being in central Pennsylvania, State College, Pennsylvania, I was able to see this event, and that's what jump started it. And then I remember the next thing that really got me intrigued was the talking about the seasons and exactly why we have the seasons as a result of the tilt of the earth. And speaking about it and describing it in class made so much sense to me and kind of shifted my perspective on the earth. Whereas before I was just like, yeah, it's just the sun. And I had thought that it was because we're orbiting closer to the sun, and the days are longer that time, but I didn't know why. And I was actually wrong about that first part. It's not because we are any closer to the sun. In fact, sometimes it's quite the opposite, where I mean, we're not talking millions and millions of miles, but there is a difference at certain points during the winter time where we're closer than when we are in the summer months, when we may be further away from the sun. What changes is as you rotate the earth, because we're on a 23.5 degree angle, if you're right here, as the earth turns and the sun's rays are coming from this way, if you're right here, you're going to be getting that sunlight directly overhead. And how my professor talked about it in class was, if you go out during the summer and you track where the sun goes throughout the course of the day, the sun's going to go directly up over your head during the summer. Now, do that same test in the wintertime. If you look in the wintertime, the sun's going to go just barely above the horizon, sometimes halfway above the horizon, but certainly not directly over your head. And as a result of those two differences, the days are not only longer, but there's also more direct sunlight on you during the summers, particularly in North America. And from that point on, I was just hooked. I was like, this is so cool, because it was a science subject, um, unlike math, where I could understand it and I could visualize and I could explain these things to my friends at the time. And I would say to them, dude, this is so cool that this is actually a real thing that happens. And like, we're so lucky. And then just thinking about the consequences of, if one of these things, if the Earth's tilt was a little bit more or a little bit less, what that would mean for life here on Earth. Would I be here right now? And then having all of those thoughts cascade into one another and really, really explode in my head. I thought many times that this was definitely something that I would have an interest in. And then I started taking a lot of astronomy classes. So, yeah, that's kind of my story about really getting into this stuff, like science and that kind of stuff. And just there's never, uh, I mean, once you kind of think about it, it's hard not to, at least for myself, to not think about the universe that is out there. The the facts of black holes being out there, neutron stars, supernovas. thinking about this stuff and looking at stories and looking at images of these kind of things is one of the coolest things ever. And it's something I think about on a daily basis now. And I find it very hard not to. Once I kind of understood this stuff and the reality of why this happens or why that happens, once I kind of learned about that stuff via college, is what made me really appreciate it more because I could know it more so in depth. It wasn't just scientists say this or that thing. It's no, here is direct imagery. Here is satellite images. Here is your satellite or your telescope, I should say, here on campus that you looked at. You looked through and you saw this individual star and you were able to track it, or this individual planet and you were able to track it. Or I think I talked about this previously, going to the Dominican Republic with my beautiful wife, seeing Saturn and Jupiter through a telescope for the very first time. If I was alone, I probably would have broke down crying. It was one of the more surreal experiences of my life because you spend so much, especially for me, somebody who thinks about this stuff so frequently, thinks about the possibility of us being alone, of us being so lucky that we're able to experience this, that I'm able to record a podcast. I don't have to worry about gathering food and resources and fighting in a war in 25 BC. I'm living in 2023 and I have a job that I enjoy. I make enough money so that I'm not having to live out as a homeless man in the streets. And much of that is due because my wife also provides us a living as well. And combined, the both of us, we're doing good. And hopefully, with this, I can put as much time and effort into this. And hopefully, one day, this could be my full time job. I mean, I would love for this. I'd love to have guests on the show, people come on that I can ask questions and understand more. Like, not even just like a Neil deGrasse Tyson kind of dude, but NBA and NFL players and ask them these questions about what they think about this stuff. Because I guarantee you, Tom Brady is not thinking about black holes. He's not thinking about K218b. And bringing this stuff to their attention would hopefully give them an idea of the reality in which we live in and that we don't know. We do not know what is going on. And for me, it's very comforting because I don't have to know what's going on because nobody does. Back to the article. When the NASA Dragonfly mission, which launches in 2027, arrives at Titan in 2034, it will send a rotocraft lander to fly across the frigid surface of this moon in an effort to hunt for those potential biological signs. That doesn't exactly mean it'll search for bug-eyed aliens, however. At the very least, the team hopes the lander will detect the chemical building blocks of life we're familiar with. Now, I'll pull up a picture and kind of show you what this spacecraft is, but let's continue reading. The Dragonfly mission is initially set to land at the Selk crater area on Titan. This is because when calculating the stress exerted on Titan's surface as a result of tidal forces, researchers weren't only focused on whether there might be signs of extraterrestrial life on the ground. They also explored the chance that the Selk crater could be subjected to shear deformation to figure out whether it's a safe landing spot option for Dragonfly. So the gravity from Saturn, in the case of Titan, is so great that the actual surface is being pushed and pulled and stretched, which is crazy to think about. Burkhardt and colleagues also looked at the geology of the Jovian moon, Ganymede, which is around Jupiter, to investigate the icy body's history of tidal stress. In particular, the team looked at a bright region in the northwest of Ganymede called Phyllis Sulcus, which is composed of parallel sets of fractures. All right, the researchers basically looked at available high-resolution observations of the area to find that there are different regions of tectonic deformation and bands of light terrain that cross over each other. The cross-cutting nature of these bands indicated to Burckhardt and colleagues the existence of 3 distinct areas of geological activity: ancient, intermediate, and young. When investigating other parts of Phyllus the team found the direction of slip features to have different alignments. This implies these features may have been generated by processes other than high tidal stress. Quote, so Ganymede has had a tidal midlife crisis, but its youngest crisis remains enigmatic. Burckhardt added. The geological investigations undertaken by the team and others are vital for forming the missions of spacecraft that aim to explore solar system moons like Titan and Ganymede. Dragonfly, Europa Clipper, and ESA's JUICE will further constrain our modeling approach. So those are other missions that are going as well, but let's talk just simply about Dragonfly. Wait here, this is kind of what it's going to look like. If you're watching this on video, it's basically a big giant drone that's going to be on the surface of Titan. It's very, very cool. And we have something on a much smaller scale, but similar to this already on the surface of Mars. We have a helicopter, and I've shown that video so many times. It's called Ingenuity. We've talked about it many times. Dragonfly is a planned spacecraft and mission to send a robotic rotocraft to the surface of Titan, the largest moon of Saturn. Planned to be launched 2028 in July. It would then use its vertical takeoffs and landings capability to move between exploration sites. All right. So it's an astrobiology mission to Titan to assess its microbial habitability and study its prebiotic chemistry at various locations. All right. And you can kind of see here. I don't want to go too much in depth, but here's the mission that I was actually talking about earlier. All right, this video, the descent imager spectral radiometer during the descent of the Huygens onto Titan, January 14th, 2005. This is video of them landing on Titan. University of Arizona. Sound is weird. You can kind of see as it's coming through, it's getting more and more clear. It's getting more data coming back. Kind of shift forward. Now you can really see the surface coming into view. That's crazy. Getting lower and lower. Really coming down to the surface. About a touchdown. These are pictures around. Pretty crazy. Yeah. So that was 2005. Now this one, we're hopefully going to get a lot better data than this on this mission. But yeah, something to look out for, something cool. The potential of alien life on these 2 moons.